I never heard the insult as much as I felt it, sharp, casual, tossed across a plate of meatloaf and overcooked peas. You eat, but don't help. The words hung in the air like smoke. My fork stopped midair, trembling just a little. Across from me, my son didn't even lift his head. His silence screamed louder than her voice ever could. Samantha smiled when she said it, the kind of smile people use when they think cruelty is honesty. My grandson stopped chewing. He was too young to understand the words, but old enough to feel their sting. That's how children are, they don't need the story, they just know when love has left the room. I didn't say a thing, not about the arthritis that made it hard to scrub floors, not about the pain that pulsed in my lower back like a slow drum, not about how I'd once cleaned houses, ironed clothes, and walked miles in snow so this very boy, my son, could eat, could learn, could live better. No, I just swallowed the last bite and set my fork down quietly. That was how I fought back, not with rage, but with silence. That night, they laughed in the living room. I could hear glasses clinking, a TV humming, her voice rising, his lowering. It had been years since laughter like that belonged to me. The guest room wasn't a room, not really. A converted storage space, one narrow bed, no closet, one window too high to see the street. The ceiling fan clicked, and I counted the turns, waiting for sleep that wouldn't come. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I had long passed the point where tears helped anything. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream, it just sits inside you, quietly sharpening itself. I thought of my husband, the long nights I wiped his fever, the clothes I washed when he couldn't make it to the bathroom, the soup I spoon-fed into a mouth that barely remembered how to chew. He died slowly, but with dignity. I helped him keep that, and when he left, I kept the house, the boy, the bills, and the weight of everything else. Jason, my boy, once, he was the reason I worked 2 shifts at the dry cleaner. I'd sew his school buttons late into the night, my fingers pricked raw but my heart full. I was the loudest at his graduation, though I sat at the back, because we could only afford 2 seats, and I gave the front to his girlfriend. Funny how the people you raise sometimes forget who taught them what love looks like. 2 days later, they left. A couple's weekend, she said. My son didn't meet my eyes. They packed, laughed, and left me behind. Again, when the door closed, I stood in that too quiet kitchen. The coffee pot hissed. The sunlight hit the table just right. I folded the dish towel, placed my house key beside it, and left. No note. No words. Just the sound of my shoes on the porch, leaving behind a home that had stopped being one long ago. The bus ride across town smelled like dust and strangers. My knees ached, but I didn't complain. I never did. The boarding house wasn't pretty. The walls were thin, the sheets smelled faintly of bleach and boiled peas, but it was mine, for now. When the woman at the front desk asked how long I'd stay, I said, just a little while. She nodded like she'd heard that before. That night, I sat on the edge of the narrow bed, staring at the single window that opened to the shadow of a tree. Was I really just someone who ate? Had I become that? The thought cut deep, but somewhere beneath the ache, another voice stirred. A quieter, older voice, the one that used to tell me I could survive anything. What if they're wrong? It whispered. 5 mornings later, I found myself standing before a brass plate. James Callahan, attorney at law. I hadn't been there in 10 years. He was my husband's oldest friend, the man who helped us with the will, the deed, the endless papers after the cancer. He looked older now. Same books, same smell of leather and dust. When I told him why I'd come, he didn't ask questions. He just reached for a folder and slid it across the desk. You should have received this, he said. I opened it. My name. My signature. The house, mine, legally. Since 1994. Signed over before my husband passed. I stared at it, the edges trembling in my hands. All this time, they thought I was a guest in my own home, but I was the owner. The keeper. The forgotten root of everything. James smiled softly. Maybe now is the time, he said, and maybe it was. When I left his office, the cold air hit my face like baptism. I wasn't sure what I would do next, whether I'd sell it, take it back, or just let them live in the illusion that they owned it. But one thing I knew for certain, I was not just someone who ate. And I would never again sit quietly at a table where love had gone rotten. The air in James Callahan's office hadn't changed in decades. It still smelled faintly of dust, old wood, and something else, a scent that reminded me of sealed memories. He poured the tea without asking, just like he always did. 2 sugars, no milk. The small sound of the spoon stirring felt almost sacred, like something from another life. "You want me to pull the deed?" he asked at last, his voice a low hum against the rain tapping on the window. I didn't speak. I only nodded. He opened a locked drawer, the same one I remembered from the days when my husband was alive. He always kept important things there, contracts, wills, promises that outlived people. When he slid the folder toward me, I felt something inside me tremble. He opened it like scripture, and there it was, my name, clear and firm, printed on paper that had yellowed with time. June 12, 1994. The date looked like an echo. My husband's signature, shaky but steady enough to mean what it said. Witnessed and notarized. The house, the one I scrubbed until the tiles shone like mirrors, the one that had seen birthdays, funerals, Christmas mornings, and the slow dying of a good man, the house I had been told to leave, mine legally, completely, quietly mine for 50 years. I didn't know he followed through, I whispered. James smiled, eyes soft behind his glasses. He came the week after the diagnosis. Said he didn't want you to ever end up without a home. Told me, and I quote, "She built this family. She should never have to ask to stay in her own house." I pressed a trembling hand to my chest. That man, even while dying, was protecting me in ways no one else ever had. "I never told Jason," I said. "Did you think you'd never need to?" James asked gently. I looked down at the deed again. The letters blurred, not from tears, but from something heavier, memory, disbelief, the quiet ache of being remembered by someone long gone. I thought they'd always remember who I was. James didn't say anything to that. He didn't have to. The silence was answer enough. I didn't take the bus home that day. I walked. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened with the memory of it. Leaves stuck to my shoes, and the air smelled of wet earth and diesel. Every step felt like reclaiming a part of myself, not anger, that had burned out long ago, not revenge. I was too tired for that. It was balance. Quiet, clean balance. For years, I thought I had been living in their house, but now I understood, they had been living in mine. The care home was still humming when I returned. Dinner trays clattered, a nurse laughed somewhere down the hall, and Helen was arguing with the television again. I carried a paper bag of pastries for the kitchen staff and a small bouquet of carnations for her, pink, her favorite. She laughed when I handed them to her. "You trying to bribe me?" "Maybe," I said. "Maybe I just wanted to see you smile." We shared tea in her tiny room. Hers smelled faintly of lavender and mothballs, and when she finally shuffled off to bed, I spread the papers across my narrow mattress. The folder glowed under the lamplight, each line a piece of proof that I wasn't crazy, proof that I hadn't imagined my worth, proof that I existed beyond usefulness. He had signed it with love. I would sign it away with clarity. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. The room was small, a twin bed, a single chair, a view of the parking lot, but it was mine. No slamming doors. No whispered complaints, just stillness, and in that stillness, I rediscovered myself. The next morning, I helped fold laundry in the common room. No one asked me to. I just wanted to move, to feel my hands useful again. I portioned soup in the kitchen, helped a nurse change the channel for a half-blind woman named Edith, and sat on the porch when the sun broke through. I was still someone who helped, only this time, I chose where and when. That's how I met Helen, really met her. She was wiry, loud, her walker decorated with pink ribbons and stickers that said "Still Standing." She told me once, while knitting, that her daughter-in-law made her eat in the laundry room. She didn't cry when she said it, but I saw her hands shake. "It's like they erased me," she whispered. "Like I stopped existing when I stopped being useful." That sentence stayed with me for days. It clung to my ribs like a pin, because that was it, wasn't it? That was the quiet violence of getting old. You don't die, you're erased. That weekend, I called James again. When he picked up, I said only, "I'm ready." He didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. The same office, the same old oak desk, the same manila folder that now carried my final decision. The paperwork took days, appraisals, tax filings, escrow documents. The house was in good condition. Of course it was. I had kept it that way all my life. When he handed me the last document, I took a moment to remember the smell of Christmas ham, the squeal of a child running down the hallway, the day my husband carried me over the threshold, half laughing, half terrified of the mortgage. Then I signed. My hands didn't tremble this time. "No warnings," I said. "No calls. They'll get the notification after it closes." James nodded. He didn't smile, but I saw pride flicker in his eyes when I left his office. The sun was setting, red and gold against the courthouse steps. I paused there for a long time, not because I doubted my choice, but because endings, even the right ones, deserve a moment of silence. That night, I slept, truly slept, not the restless half-sleep of someone waiting for kindness, but the deep, dreamless rest of someone who has finally acted. It wasn't revenge that filled me. It was peace. A rare, unfamiliar peace that comes when a woman finally stops apologizing for surviving. 6 months passed. The house sold quietly. A letter was sent, not from me, but from the law firm. I didn't see their faces when they opened it, but I could imagine the silence, the disbelief, the echo of what they'd said. You eat, but don't help. Now they would understand what help had really meant. It had meant years. It had meant sacrificed. It had meant everything. I never called them. I didn't need to. The money went into a trust for my grandson's education, not out of guilt, but out of love for the only innocent in that whole story. The rest, I used to secure my stay at the home, the kind of security no one could take away. Some nights, Helen and I sit by the window in the common room, knitting slowly. She hums old songs. I sip my tea with 2 sugars, no milk. Do you ever miss it? She asked once. The house? No, I said, smiling faintly. Being needed. She laughed. Maybe a little. And for the first time, I laughed too, because I finally understood. I was never just someone who ate. I was the woman who held the deed, and I had signed my name back into my own life. There's a kind of silence that doesn't echo. It just stays. That night, it stayed with me. The courtyard lamps outside Haven House flickered, scattering pale light across the window pane. Somewhere down the hall, Helen was humming, a forgotten hymn, maybe, her voice trembling with age and mercy. The sound didn't comfort me, it steadied me. Like a heartbeat that had finally found its rhythm after years of confusion. That was the first night I didn't feel guilt for choosing peace. It had been 6 months since I signed the papers. The world had changed its clothes 3 times since then. Summer's heat, autumn's gray, and the faint whisper of another winter waiting at the door. I almost forgot the date. Almost. Then James called. His voice was calm, practiced. It's done, he said. Funds cleared this morning. The house officially belongs to the new owners. You'll receive the statement in 2 days. I thanked him. Hung up. Then waited, not for relief, for consequence. It didn't take long. 3 letters arrived, one from the bank, one from the real estate office, and one, hand-delivered. Certified. Final. A notice to vacate within 30 days. By Sunday evening, my son called. I didn't answer. He called again and again. Finally, I sent a message, not cruel, not apologetic, just truth written with the steadiness of someone who's done being explained to. The transfer was legal. The home was mine. I simply took back the meal I once paid for. Silence stretched for a day, then it came, Samantha's voice, shrill. Cracked. Disbelieving. You evil old woman. You sold our house. This was our home. How could you? I didn't raise my voice. Didn't defend. Didn't justify. No, Samantha, I said. It was my home. You just lived there. Rent-free, like I once fed you both. Now it's someone else's turn. She hung up. No thank you. No apology. Just rage. That evening, I stood by the window of Haven House, the little refuge I built with what they called greed. Watching the courtyard lights blink like distant stars, I thought it would feel like victory, but it didn't. It felt like exhale, like the moment you stop pressing your fingers into a wound and finally let it close. Not triumphant. Not bitter, just, still. The next morning, my phone rang again. Jason this time. My son. My boy. He sounded like he did when he was little, afraid, caught, soft around the edges. Mom, he whispered, we're going to lose everything. We have nowhere to go. The kids, Samantha's crying every day. I messed up. I should have said something. I should have stopped her. I let him speak until the storm inside him broke into silence. Then I said what had been folded inside me for years, a sentence I had rehearsed in secret, over countless sleepless nights. I'm not taking anything from you, Jason. I'm only reclaiming what you thought I had forgotten. He didn't speak. I continued, quietly. I'm not asking for love. I'm asking for recognition. A pause. Then the question I had expected, is there any way you can undo it? And I told him the truth he needed to hear, the kind that burns before it heals. Jason, I gave everything to raise you. I never kept score, but the moment your wife opened her mouth and you said nothing, something in me changed. I don't want your money. I don't even want your apology. I just want my silence back, and this is how you'll learn it. The line went dead. That was okay, because for the first time, I didn't rescue anyone. There's a drawer in every mother's life that holds more than it seems. Mine sat under a dusty lamp in the corner of my room at Haven House, a small wooden drawer that squeaked when opened. Inside, birthday cards, faded photographs, prayer beads, and one leather-bound notebook. My husband gave it to me on our 25th anniversary. On the first page, in his careful handwriting, it read, "For the things we never want to forget." And I hadn't. That evening, after Samantha's words had stopped ringing in my ears, I opened it. My hands didn't shake, not anymore. The pages smelled of lavender and of time itself. At first, it was nothing more than grocery lists and sermon notes. But over the years, it became something else, a ledger of love given without receipt, a record of everything I gave away without asking to be remembered. The record: 1994, Jason's tuition after he dropped out, $2,500,1996, car loan, first 5 months, $1,800,1999, ER bill when Samantha's insurance wouldn't cover it, $7,402,001, wedding gift, so you can have a real honeymoon, $5,000,2005, covered rent for 3 months, $3,600,2008, bought crib and stroller for first grandchild, $1,200 page after. Page point 2011, down payment for second car, $4,000,2013, replaced their water heater, $9,502,015, helped with IVF, $7,000,2017, paid for Samantha's dental surgery, $2,100,2020, pandemic groceries across 5 months, $4,530 years of quiet generosity. 30 years of invisible motherhood. When I finished calculating, the total sat above $120,000, though the real cost could never fit in a number. I whispered to myself, almost smiling through the ache. I used to give without keeping track, but they made me start counting. And it broke my heart, not because I regretted any of it, but because they had erased it as if it never happened. I made copies of each page, neat, labeled, dated, gave them to James, my lawyer. A living will, not of money, but of memory. This isn't for revenge, I told him, it's so that someday, if they ask why, I won't have to say a word. The numbers will speak for themselves. James looked at me for a long time, then said softly, "You're not wrong, Ruth. You're just finally being honest about what it cost." And I smiled, not from satisfaction, but from clarity, because I had loved them more than they had noticed, and now, I had proof that my silence wasn't absence, it was sacrifice. That night, I placed the notebook back in its drawer, beneath the lamp's tired light. But before closing it, I wrote one last line. 2025, sold the house. Built a new one for women like me, called it Haven House, worth $0 in interest, value, immeasurable. Then I whispered, they thought I was just an old woman who ate without giving, but I fed them for decades, and now, I'm finally feeding myself. Later, I brewed a cup of tea, the same kind I used to make for them on Sunday mornings with pancakes and maple syrup. Only this time, the sweetness belonged to me alone, and I realized something. Peace, like revenge, doesn't scream. It just arrives. Quietly. Patiently. Like an overdue apology you stop waiting for. I sipped slowly, staring at the courtyard lights, and for the first time in years, I didn't wish for anyone to call, because the silence, this time, belonged to me. They thought I sold the house for revenge, for pride, for a final word in an argument that should have ended long ago, but the truth was smaller and braver. I didn't want revenge. I wanted purpose. I didn't want to destroy what broke me. I wanted to build something that would speak louder than resentment ever could. So, I went searching, not for a place to live, but for a reason to keep living. It started on a slow Tuesday morning, the kind that carried no expectations. The kind that slips between days like an afterthought. I was walking on the east side of town, past a row of buildings that wore their years like bruises, faded paint, tired windows, porches that sagged under the weight of old laughter. That's when I saw it. 4 units. peeling paint. A porch that looked one storm away from collapse, but there was something in the bones, strong, honest, waiting. The real estate agent looked at me like I was lost. Most folks your age look for retirement communities, she said. This isn't exactly luxury. I'm not looking for luxury, I told her, I'm looking for use. I bought it that day and I named it Haven House. Below the nameplate, I had engraved a phrase into the wood myself, pressing each letter slowly, carefully, like prayer. No one here proves their worth to stay. It wasn't a sheltered, it wasn't a charitied, it was a home for the forgotten, women like me, like Helen, like every mother whose hands once built a world no one bothered to thank her for. We started with very little. A handyman named Tommy helped me rebuild the porch. His mother had lived in a care home too. When he learned what I was building, he worked weekends for free. You're doing something good, he said once, wiping sawdust from his hands. Feels rare these days. I smiled. Good things usually are. We painted the walls soft yellow. Planted herbs in old bathtubs turned garden beds. The air smelled like soil and hope. The first resident was Helen, a woman with trembling hands and eyes like forgotten hymns. When she walked in, she cried, "You didn't forget me," she whispered. "Of course not," I said. We remember those who've been forgotten. Over the next months, we welcomed 3 more. There was Miss Beatrice, once a schoolteacher, who corrected our grammar mid-sentence and laughed at herself right after. There was Marion, who used to run a flower shop. She grew basil on the windowsill like it was her last student, disciplined, proud, alive. And there was Roland, our first and only man, a widower who cooked like a poet and always had a joke waiting in his pocket. Each of us carried something, a grief, a loss, a name we didn't say anymore. But here, we built something new out of it. I became the unofficial manager. Groceries. Doctor visits. Legal papers. On Thursdays, I brewed tea and read the local paper aloud, the way my late husband used to read the evening news, his glasses sliding down his nose. On Sundays, we played old records and danced in socks across the wooden floor. The sound of laughter echoed through the rooms like wind in spring curtains. Fragile, unexpected, healing point. One day, as Roland sliced tomatoes at the counter, he looked up at me. "You know," he said, "we're alive today because someone once called you a leech." I froze, then laughed. A deep, stunned, honest laugh. Ironic, isn't it? I said, "Pain built a roof." He nodded. "You turned insult into shelter. That's more than most people ever do." That night, I wrote a new entry in my notebook. They called me a burden. But with the money from that burden, I feed 4 souls who now sleep in peace. Haven House had no locks on the inside doors, not because we didn't value privacy, but because we had nothing left to hide. Trust, here, wasn't a rule. It was survival. It was grace. One evening, the sun poured gold over the porch. Helen stood beside me, holding a mug of chamomile tea. "It'll all be happy again," she said softly. "You're not alone," I told her. She smiled. "Neither are you." And for once, I believed her. He came almost a year later, not with arrogance. Not with excuses, but with the silence of a man who had been broken by his own pride. Jason. My son. I recognized him immediately, though time had rearranged his face. His shoulders curved inward now. His eyes were tired, not from years, but from regret. "I know I don't deserve to be here," he said. I didn't answer. I just motioned for him to sit. "We lost the house," he continued. Samantha left. She said I should have fought harder. But I didn't know how. I didn't know what to say back then. "Mom." I didn't know what to do. His voice cracked on the word mom. "We have nothing now," he said. "I sleep on a friend's couch. I work nights. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Still, I said nothing. Instead, I opened the small wooden box beside my chair. From it, I pulled a photograph, the first days of Haven House, the porch unpainted. The garden bare. 4 people laughing, barefoot, holding paintbrushes like flags of defiance. I handed it to him. He looked down, confused. Then realization dawned. "You built this?" he whispered. I nodded. "With the money from our house?" "Yes," I said softly. "And you didn't spend it on yourself?" "I spent it on something that could grow." He stared at the photo, then at me. "Why?" Finally, I answered, "Because I ate your rice for 1 year, Jason, but you ate mine for 30. I'm only collecting a little interest." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Words failed him. I stood, my knees aching, but I stood tall. He looked up, tears rising. I didn't come here to hurt you, he said quietly. I know. I just wanted to thank you for everything I never said thank you for. I studied him, the stubble, the exhaustion, the boy buried under years of pride. There's something you still need to understand, I said. He waited. I never needed repayment. I needed respect. I needed to know my years weren't erased just because I slowed down, that the hands that once held your fevered head weren't suddenly useless because they trembled. He lowered his gaze. I forgot who you were. No, I said. You remembered too late. He looked like a man trying to stand inside his own guilt without drowning in it. After a pause, he asked, can I help? With the house? With the others? I shook my head. This place doesn't need your guilt. It needs your growth. Live better. Love better. That's how you honor what I gave. He nodded slowly, and I reached into the box again, not for the photograph, but for a single sheet of paper. A blank deed. Untitled. Clean. Waiting. I handed it to him. Go fill this with something worthy, I said. He held it as if it were gold. I will. And for the first time in years, I believed him. It was a quiet spring afternoon, the kind that doesn't hurry, that drifts between seconds as though even time wanted to rest. The breeze wandered through the trees like a reader through a familiar bookstore, unhurried, curious, content. From the kitchen came the smell of bread. Helen was humming again. Marian's laughter rolled through the hall, and in that golden, ordinary peace, I realized I had spent a lifetime feeding others. Now, at last, I was feeding something that would outlive me. Haven House wasn't built from revenge. It was built from remembrance, because sometimes the greatest act of defiance is to turn pain into shelter, and keep the kettle warm for those who finally find their way home. The heaviest kind of burial. It's the way people disappear while still breathing, erased by the people they raised, by the years they gave. And no one comes looking, because the world moves too fast to notice slow, quiet suffering. That's what Haven House became, a rebellion disguised as a porch, a hymn built from broken promises. It's where silence came to rest, not to die, but to transform. I remember the night it rained for the first time after I bought the place. The roof leaked in 2 spots, the floorboards swelled, and the air smelled like wet earth and faint mold. I should have been worried, but instead I stood in the living room, barefoot, the storm rattling the windows, and felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Because for the first time in a long time, the mess was mine. The struggle was mine. And no one could take it from me. That night I wrote on a scrap of paper and taped it to the fridge. No one here earns love. No one begs to stay. We belong because we're still breathing. The next morning, Helen arrived with 2 suitcases and a box full of teacups wrapped in old newspapers. I hope you drink tea, she said. I laughed and pointed at the kettle. That was how it began. Days turned into months. The walls filled with photos and laughter. The smell of rosemary and soap drifted through the hallways. The air buzzed with small, ordinary miracles, someone remembering a recipe, someone humming after weeks of silence, someone daring to wear red lipstick again just because. One evening, Roland made soup. Thick, hearty, the kind that fills a room with the scent of home. As we ate, Miss B told us about her first teaching job, 1956, a 1-room schoolhouse, 20 children, 1 chalkboard. They didn't listen, she said, grinning, but they learned anyway. That's when I realized, Haven House wasn't just a shelter. It was an echo chamber for lives that had been too quiet for too long. But even joy has shadows. Some nights, when the others were asleep, I'd sit alone by the window, watching the streetlights hum against the dark. And sometimes I'd think of him, my son. The one who once cried because I couldn't stay with him on the first day of school. The same boy who years later told me I'd become a burden. I wondered if he ever thought of me. I wondered if he regretted the way he let silence become our final language. It took him nearly a year to return. When he did, he didn't knock right away. He stood at the gate, uncertain, his hands trembling slightly. From my chair on the porch, I watched him, the shape of him familiar yet foreign, the years between us heavy but invisible. When he finally walked toward me, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes sounded like memory breaking apart. "Mom," he said, and his voice cracked. That one word, it carried all the things he didn't know how to say. He sat down, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. The cicadas filled the air, the scent of basil drifted from the garden, and somewhere inside, Helen's laughter carried through the hallway. "We lost the house," he said at last. Samantha left. She said I should have fought harder, but I didn't know how. I didn't know what to do. His voice faltered. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I listened, not out of cruelty, but out of patience, the kind of patience that only heartbreak can teach. When he finished, I reached for a small wooden box beside me. Inside was a photograph, Haven House in its earliest days. The paint was still peeling then. The porch unsteady. But the people in the photo, all smiling, barefoot, alive, they were the proof of what love rebuilt can look like. I handed it to him. You built this, he whispered, with what you called wasted, I said. He swallowed hard, looking from the photo to me. And you didn't keep any for yourself? I did, I said, tapping my chest. Here. He looked away, his shoulders shaking. Why, Mom? I smiled faintly. Because I ate your rice for 1 year. But you ate mine for 30. This is just the interest. For a long while, there was only the sound of the wind brushing the curtains. I didn't come here to hurt you, he said quietly. I know, I said. You came here because you finally remembered. He nodded. Can I help? With the house, the others, this place doesn't need your guilt, I interrupted softly. It needs your growth. You honor me by living better than before. Before he left, I gave him a blank deed, a piece of paper with nothing on it but his name. Fill this, I told him, with something worthy. He held it like a fragile thing, like hope reborn. I will, he said. And I believed him. That night, after he was gone, I sat again on the porch with my chipped teacup. The rain had stopped, but the earth still glistened like it had just been forgiven. The others had gone to bed. The lights from their rooms spilled soft amber through the windows, living proof that loneliness doesn't have to end in despair. I thought of all the women who'd come through Haven House. Of the way they'd arrived hollow and left humming. Of the ones who had no one left to miss them, and how we had become that someone. And I thought, maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting. Maybe it's about building something too beautiful for bitterness to survive in. The next morning, I found the woman in the Sunday hat waiting at the gate again. She wasn't here to move in. She just stood there, holding a bouquet of lilies. For the porch, she said. For what you made. I took them gently, my hands trembling a little. Thank you, I said. She smiled. No. Thank you for reminding me that it's not too late. When she left, I placed the lilies in the chipped vase on the porch table. Their fragrance mingled with the smell of tea and rain, wrapping around me like a prayer that didn't need words, and I knew then, Haven House would outlive me. It would stand as a quiet defiance against everything that tried to erase us, because love, I've learned, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a porch that welcomes whoever has nowhere else to go. Sometimes it's the courage to build again when no one expects you to, and sometimes, love is simply this, a chipped teacup, a fading sunset, and the unshakable peace of knowing that you are still here, still useful, still worthy, because the world may forget your name, but the lives you touch, they never do. And if anyone ever tells you you're too old, too broken, too late, tell them this, you've only just begun. It wasn't just a closing line, it was a declaration, a heartbeat stitched into the silence that too many women had learned to live inside. When I said welcome to Grandma True Stories, it wasn't about a brand. It was a door. A door for the forgotten, the dismissed, the ones who still whisper I'm fine even when their hearts are breaking quietly behind closed curtains. I wanted it to feel like stepping into a warm kitchen at dusk, light spilling across the floor, the scent of tea and old wood, and someone waiting at the table who doesn't ask what took you so long. Because isn't that what we all need? To be seen, not for what we used to do, but for who we still are. You see, I didn't start telling stories because I was brave. I started because I was lonely. Because one night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house hummed with the quiet ache of old age, I looked at my reflection and realized no one knew who I was anymore. Not really. Not the woman who'd raised 3 children on a single income. Not the woman who sang to herself while folding laundry so she wouldn't cry. Not the woman who once dreamed of traveling, but stayed home because love, or what she thought was love, needed her to. I began writing small things. Memories that clung to me like perfume from another life. The smell of my mother's cornbread on Sundays. The sound of my son's small feet running down the hall. The way my husband used to call me sunlight before time and pride dimmed his voice, and then I wrote the hard things, the nights when the laughter stopped, the days when silence screamed louder than words. I didn't write them to be pitied. I wrote them to survive. Because once you give pain a name, it loses its power to own you. I started sharing my stories online, under a name that felt safe, Grandma True Stories. I thought maybe 5 people would read them. Maybe someone bored, maybe someone scrolling through the noise. But what I didn't expect were the messages that started arriving, thousands of them. From women in their 60s and 70s. From daughters, from caregivers, even from men who said they saw their mothers in my words. One wrote. You told my story before I could find the courage to tell it myself. Another said. I thought I was the only one still crying in the laundry room. That's when I understood, it wasn't just me speaking. It was all of us, finally allowed to breathe at the same time, because silence, it doesn't just hide pain, it feeds it. It grows vines around your worth until you start believing you're asking for too much when all you ever wanted was kindness, and so, Grandma True Stories became something more than storytelling. It became a place for remembering, not the glamorous parts, but the raw, cracked, tender ones. The parts that smell like Vicks and saltwater tears and the last cup of coffee before sunrise. When I speak now, I don't polish the edges. I leave them jagged because life was never smooth. I tell the truth, even the ugly kind. Especially the ugly kind. Because pretending doesn't heal anyone, and if you're reading this, if something inside you stirs like an old wound remembering how to ache, don't be ashamed. That ache is proof that you're still alive, that you still care. You see, I learned something in my years at Haven House. Healing doesn't arrive in grand moments. It sneaks in slowly, in the sound of laughter from a room you built with your own hands, in the taste of warm tea shared with someone who finally understands your silence, in the small brave act of saying no more and meaning it. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find that you've been building your own version of Haven House all along, every time you chose compassion over bitterness. Every time you reached out when you had every reason to turn away. That's what Grandma True Stories really is, a porch light left on for the weary. A table with an extra chair for whoever needs to sit down and breathe. So, if your heart has been heavy for too long, if you've forgotten what your laughter sounds like, if you've been surviving when you should have been living, sit with me for a while. Here, you don't have to prove anything. You don't have to explain the choices you made to stay, or the courage it took to finally leave. You don't have to be perfect, young, or unbroken. You just have to be honest, because that's how we reclaim what was taken from us, one story at a time, one truth at a time, one trembling voice that decides it's done being quiet. So, welcome home, welcome to the stories that saved me, and might just save you too. Welcome to Grandma True Stories.